Welcome back to Cove Life, and for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, it's good to have you aboard. And this is actually my very first review of a cruise I've taken recently. This is the Princess Cruises Cape Horn and Strait of Magellan cruise, which began in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and ended in Santiago, Chile, and those two stops were very important to my family and I as why we chose this particular cruise. Now, what I'll say is that this is my first time actually taking a Princess Cruises cruise, although I have cruised on a number of different cruise lines. I've been with Norwegian, Celebrity, Royal Caribbean, Holland America, a number of different cruise lines. So I have a very good perspective of what I expected from this particular cruise. And those of you that are familiar with cruising or have cruised a number of different lines know that there's sort of a hierarchy of cruise lines out there. You'll have your sort of entry-level cruise lines, your carnivals, and you could sort of include Norwegian in that. And then you have like the next step up, which includes, say, Holland America, Celebrity, Princess. And then you get into some higher end lines like Windstar, Cunard, right? There's a certain level of expectancy that comes with each tier on each different cruise line. And going into this cruise, I expected a lot. And that's because on previous cruises, I had talked to other passengers on board who swore by Princess. Like, Princess was their number one cruise line. Sure, they happened to be cruising with someone else at the time, but that was because the itinerary suited what they were after. Now, in this case, we were looking forward to Princess because, again, it's a slightly higher tier line. Secondly, I've heard great things about them from a number of different cruisers. And third, this itinerary is going to be phenomenal for me because I'd never been to South America, and I was getting an opportunity to not only see places I've never seen before, experience some places I've heard of in a number of different things, and lastly, meet some family friends because my parents have cruised South America a number of times and have also spent a fair amount of time in South America. It was kind of like one of the places they went to get away from winter here in Canada. So I was going to meet some family friends I'd heard about for years. Finally get an opportunity to meet them personally. So I was really looking forward to this. And there are aspects of this cruise that were exceptional. Okay, that exceeded my expectations. But there's also some really bad situations on this cruise as well. There are some real serious negatives. And going forward, when I'm looking for which cruise line to choose and which cruise line to select based upon itineraries, the itinerary is always number one for me. And that's something I should probably get out of the way right now, is that when I look at what I'm going to get from a cruise, the most important thing is the itinerary. Is where's the cruise going? What stops is it making? That's number one for me. Number two would probably be the food, to be honest. Okay. One thing I love about cruising is that every single night it's like going out for dinner. Okay. Every single night you're going to get dressed up, at least somewhat. You're going to get a new menu handed to you. You're going to enjoy yourself with your family, friends, spouse, whoever it is you're with, and have an outing every single evening. Plus you get to go out for breakfast. You're being pampered the whole way. So that's the number two for me. And the number three would be onboard activities, because as much as I want to see some great things to places we're going, I want to enjoy myself on ship as well. So the onboard activities is really key for me. I don't want to find myself at some point during each day, especially when you're spending days at sea. And this particular itinerary has 4 days at sea. We end up having 5, but I'll get into that. You're hoping to have some real entertainment to get you through the day. And I'm not talking about, just the big Hollywood style show at the end of the day, the big theater show. I mean, you're going to get that on every single ship. So that's something that comes as an obvious perk no matter who you sail with. But what I want is something to do during the day. And it kind of fell short there. And again, later on in this review, I'll get into that. And then fourth would be those standout shows at the end of each night. You're hoping to get some really great performances out of that. And then lastly is the shopping on board, and what kind of sales do they have on board? What kind of interesting sort of packages do they put together to entice you to maybe spend a little extra on board and get some sort of deal out of it? And I'm going to cover all of that in this particular review. But I'm going to begin with the itinerary and why this itinerary was so important to us. So this particular cruise had 8 ports, 2 points of interest, and 4 days at sea. And it's really why we chose this particular cruise. The itinerary was everything for us because, first of all, it began in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and we have friends there, so it allowed us to go down a little bit early, spend some time with friends, and get a real chance to experience the city. And then it ended in Santiago, Chile, where, again, we had family friends, so we were able to stay a little bit longer at the end of this cruise and get a full sense of what Santiago, Chile is all about. So that made it extremely appealing. But beyond that, there were a number of stops in between that I was really looking forward to. And the first of which was Montevideo, Uruguay. And the reason being is because, unless some of you probably don't know this, but I also host the Pro Sports Podcasters Podcast, which is a podcast that covers all sports, one of which being football, the world game, or soccer to some of you. And the very first World Cup championship was played in Uruguay, in Montevideo, at a stadium there that I was amped to see. Not to mention Uruguay was also the winners of the very first World Cup. So there's some sports history there I got to kind of add in to my trip, and I was looking forward to that. And beyond that, Uruguay is such a beautiful place. It's one of those locations in South America where South Americans travel to for their vacations. So it was gorgeous. It was definitely worth seeing. Also, I was looking forward to seeing the Falkland Islands, which is on this trip. I've heard so much about the Falkland Islands throughout my life. Some positive, some negative. Of course, the negative leaning toward the war side. But the positive being the flora and fauna there and the animals we were going to experience. Both my wife and I just love animals, and any chance we get to experience animals we don't see here in Canada, we take that option. So here's our chance to see penguins, which we definitely did. Okay, we got our fill of penguins in not only the Falklands, but anywhere around the southern tip of South America. So that was an opportunity there, and I was really looking forward to seeing the Falkland Islands. Another place that stood out in the itinerary was Ushuaia, Argentina. Now, this is a place where if you're into nature shows or if you're into adventure shows, you've probably heard about it. And I had heard about it through one of those means, right? It's not a place you would just normally pop into your head unless you're into that sort of thing. And it offers the kind of landscape and opportunity to ecologists and such, right? That you're not going to find everywhere. So I was really amped about going to the end of the world, as they call it, because this is where the majority of expeditions depart from on their way to Antarctica. So I was amped about that. So there was a lot that I really wanted to see on this trip, and it did not disappoint. Really, it didn't. Even some of the ports that I wasn't that excited about to begin with really surprised me when I got there, and I got a lot of personal enjoyment and a great experience out of them. So anyone thinking about doing an itinerary that goes around the southern tip of South America, do it. Do it. If it's not on your bucket list yet, it should be there, right? Not only are you going to experience some fantastic things across the board, right? Whether you're into just relaxation, architecture, different type of living, the flora and fauna, it's all available to you, so you can sort of tune your trip the way you like it, and we got the most out of it. Unfortunately, by the time we got to Puerto Montt, which for me, I wasn't that excited about, although I was looking forward to doing an excursion there, up to, say, Fruitalar to see the German settlements, and it does have some very interesting sort of nature walks available to you because of the landscape there. I wasn't able to take advantage because before we got there, I tore my Achilles tendon. So massive walking, tours was out of the question, right? At that point on, we were looking at conserving energy or taking, bus tours and that sort of thing because I could do very little walking because of the torn Achilles. But it didn't ruin the trip. Not at all. I mean, honestly, we got to Puerto Montt. Instead of going up to Fruitalar and doing one of those trips, we actually stayed within the port city itself. I kind of hollowed my way around there, but it was still a very interesting experience and a very cool city to actually kind of see. So we didn't lose anything from that. That's how good this trip was. I could significantly injure myself and not come away disappointed when it came to the itinerary. Now, things on ship were not 100% great, but as far as the itinerary goes, it's one I would suggest you do. 100%. I would take advantage of it. And not only is it interesting, but it's inexpensive. There was only one port that really cost us anything. And of course, that was the Falkland Islands because they're under British rule and they're going by the British pound. So things were a bit expensive there, but everywhere else was dirt cheap in comparison. So although it's going to cost you some time and money to get down to South America, depending on where you're leaving from, once you're there, the beating your pocketbook's going to take is slight. Okay, it's not much at all. So consider that when you're planning your next vacation. If you got an opportunity to go somewhere that's going to be inexpensive for you to be there, take advantage. Now let's talk about life on board ship, on board the Sapphire Princess. Now this particular ship wasn't lacking anything. Not at all. In fact, I'd say it was maybe somewhat better amenity than some of the other ships I've been on. In that, something my wife and I have always commented about when it comes to cruise ships is that they have far too many bars. Far too many. Now, I suppose there was a time when being on ship meant socializing in a bar, having drinks, and taking it easy, but those times have passed. People have become far more active, far more engaged when it comes to life on a ship. So, this case, to me, it had just the right number of bars. They were spaced out relatively well so that no matter where you were on ship, there was one available to you. And generally they had some sort of activity or event or entertainment going on in each particular bar at some point during the day. So no matter where your cabin room was located, if you wanted something close and convenient, there was always one there, and it wasn't overboard. So that I'm really happy with. The actual promenade was a strange construction in this case. What I'm used to from the majority of ships I've been on is generally the promenade deck has rows upon rows of shops, stores, activities, locations, and such to go through. That wasn't really how it was laid out here. It was very different. You kind of had the very center of the ship, the midship, had all of the shops and such kind of around it on multiple levels. And the promenade itself was more of just a way to get from the front of the ship to the back of the ship, and it was an important corridor in that if you didn't realize that was the case, you were going to have a very hard time finding the international dining room, which for us is extremely important because we prefer to have our breakfast or lunch served to us as opposed to going up to the buffet, like with most ships on one of the top levels. Now, our very first day there, we thought, okay, let's try out the buffet. Let's see what it's all about. Now, like I said, generally speaking, we don't use the buffet all that often. It's more of a convenience thing. If the timing doesn't work out, or if we're coming back from, say, a port excursion and it's a weird time of day and we feel a little bit hungry after maybe, logging a lot of miles, walking a tour or something like that, or walking a city, we would go to the buffet. So our first day on board, we decided we'd give it a shot, and it was bad. Okay, it was not a good experience. The food was a bit rubbery. Some of it seemed a bit overcooked. The selections were great. There was a lot of choice available to you, but the quality seemed to be lacking. Now, I don't know if that was just because it was day one. Maybe there was a switchover of staff. Who knows? But it was not good. And it was bad enough that it turned us off it for the rest of the cruise. Now, we weren't alone in that sentiment. We were on a tour in Montevideo, Uruguay, just, a couple days later, and we were talking with a couple of the other passengers who had been on board with us on that tour, and they agreed. We didn't even bring it up. They brought it up. They said, have you tried the buffet? We said, yeah. And they're like, did you think it was a little bit off? So they had the exact same experience we had, and there was a couple of different passengers we spoke to, a few actually, that all agree with us in that case, and they were avoiding the buffet from that point on. So we weren't alone in that, although later on in the cruise, we had spoken to some other people that said they had, found the sushi in the buffet or something, and they really enjoyed it, but we just had been soured enough by it. And also by that time, we had a great option in the international dining room, but we never went back. So I'm not going to comment too much on the buffet and that, except that we had a bad experience our first time out. The international dining room was very important to us because it was, the only place you could go to get served breakfast in the morning, so we would always start our day there. Right? Get up, get ready, get ourselves prepped for the day, head out for breakfast. And the breakfast options at the International Buffet were excellent. And they would mix things up sometimes as well, which was a nice change. Not something you see on every single ship, right? They would have some specials in their breakfast options. So that was a good start to every day. The service in the international dining room was good. Not fantastic, but it was good. And again, it's the morning, right? You're not looking for fantastic. What you're looking for is just to get your breakfast in you and get a start on your day. So it was easily one of the more frequented locations we went to because you could also go there for lunch. But at lunch, there were some additional options. There was the grill up on deck 14, and there was also a pizzeria on deck 5. They also had pizza available on deck 14 as well, but it was just kind of like just quick, under a heat lamp pizza. Whereas the pizza on deck 5, I'm trying to think of the name of the actual name of it. I'll put it in the description. The pizza there was fantastic. Okay, it was amazing, right? It was so good, in fact, that we went multiple days, and generally I'm not going to have pizza all that often if I can avoid it. But the pizza was there so good, we kept finding ourselves going back. And the reason being was it was very traditional Italian-style pizza. And I can say that, okay? I can say that. I've been to Naples. I've been to the birthplace of pizza, and this was exactly the style of pizza you'd get there. And it was made impeccably. It was delicious, okay? And generally I'd find myself eating a whole pizza around this size for lunch. And what's nice about that location is that you didn't have to be limited to just that, small window that was available to you at the international dining room. If you wanted to eat a little bit later, you could go there. A little bit earlier, you could go there. So that was a nice option to have. And then the grill up on 14 was a good thing to have to mix it up. It's where you could get burgers, hot dogs, pulled pork, chicken sandwiches, things like that. And anything we tried from there was great. So those two options were enough to keep us going on, say, sea days where you wouldn't have the opportunity to have lunch on shore. So as far as the avoiding the buffet went, wasn't hard for us to do. And then when it came to dining, it was fantastic. Okay, the dining experience was amazing. Now, on the Sapphire Princess, it's a little different than the majority of ships I've been on, and I think more ships are going this way because the majority of cruise ships don't really have the assigned seating anymore. It's not like one specific time at one specific table with the same people you're going to see for the entire cruise long. You can basically go whenever you want and go have dinner, okay? And in this case, it wasn't just one or two major dining rooms. They actually have 5. They have 4 that are located midships, okay? And they're all being serviced by the same kitchen. So the menus are exactly the same. It's not the food that decides where you're going to go. What decides where you're going to go is the service. And after trying all 4 midships, we decided to stick with the Vivaldi because the team there was fantastic. Okay, they went above and beyond to make us feel great. To be entirely honest, dinner was one of the highlights of our day every single day. And it should be that way. Like I said, food is the second most important to me next to the ports, right? So having that team who recognized immediately once we started becoming regulars there, who had a specific table whenever possible set aside for us because they knew where we liked to sit. We always had the same servers, the same main waiter, the same junior waiter. We were always greeted by the manager and had the assistant manager come see us at the table. It was fantastic. It was some of the best service I've had since I was on Celebrity. I'd say the two were kind of on par that way. And the food itself was amazing. Okay, the selections were great. It started off a bit slow, to be entirely honest. I was looking for some of the more, special dinner options earlier in the cruise, but I think what they were doing was specifically holding on to some of those toward later so that you leave the cruise with a fresh idea in your head of some of the great meals that were available to us. So that is A++. The food on the ship was fantastic. Save the buffet, but like I said, you could avoid that if you really wanted to, and we did. So I'm not going to knock them whatsoever when it comes to the food available on Princess Cruises. Now let's talk about the entertainment on ship. And I've kept the first day at sea activities list here with me so I can give you an idea of what was very disappointing about this cruise. Now, what you would expect on a cruise that has a number of days at sea is a number of at least varied entertainment options. But unfortunately, the majority of their available activities were either geared to sell you something or leave you sitting in place. There wasn't much to actually get you up and about. And on a ship this size, which we're talking over 3,000 passengers, you expect there to be a few more things in the way of activities for you to do. So I'm just going to run through what was available to us on our 4th day on ship, our first day at sea. Now, generally, I don't really start looking until, say, after 9, because previous to that, it's me getting up, getting ready, having breakfast, and now let's see what we can do. So, like, beginning at, say, 9:30, there was a trivia available to us in the Explorer's Lounge, which was on deck 7. That's their promenade deck. And I enjoy trivia, so I will go to the occasional trivia event. I think we actually may have even gone to this one. You also have win up to $500 in spot premiums, which again is a sales pitch. There was a speedy Sudoku challenge available to people who enjoy Sudoku. It's not something I do, so I'm not going to, engage in that. Acupuncture, a life-changing introduction. Again, that's trying to sell you something. Then there was a welcome to the Princess event at 10, which we did, okay? Because my wife and I, it's our first time on Princess Cruises, we were actually given an invite specifically in our stateroom to attend this event to let us know what Princess has to offer. And we've been to these sort of things before, and generally they're going to go over some of the special things available to us on that particular cruise line, maybe give you some sort of a perk in order to get you engaged and kind of going. So we thought this should be interesting to do. But realistically, it was a tutorial on how to make your way around the ship and, how to use the facilities and make sense of the daily itineraries and such. And I mean, unless you'd never cruised before, ever, it was a wasted time. Completely wasted time, and there was no perk whatsoever, so that was a bit of a letdown, but we weren't expecting that much from it. If I look further on, there's a Shore Excursions live tour presentation, again, trying to sell you something. Then they get into the art of collecting, and of course, the first, an art auction happening, again, trying to sell you something. They had bingo, of course, it's going to cost you to play, so you're being sold again. They had a ping pong tournament. There's something you can actually do. Okay, so that happened from 11:30 to 12:15. But now you're getting into lunchtime. So if you're looking to have lunch at the international dining room like we would, then in this particular area, this sort of time allotment spot is unavailable to you because we're going to go have lunch. So that's what we did. After lunch, let's say it started at like 1 o'clock. You've got a sparkling wine art auction, again, selling you stuff. Acupuncture for pain management, that's selling you. There was a ballroom dance class, so there's something you could actually engage in there, and that happened from 1 to 1:45. They had some crafts. Quite often at different bars, they would have some live music. They had a couple of, like a duo of violinists that would play at different bars. They had a pianist that would play at different bars, that sort of thing. But again, that's just sort of sitting, relaxing, having a drink, listening to music. There's only so much of that you want to do every single day. You get further on in the afternoon, you get some more trivia. You could have gone for afternoon tea. In the main piazza, they'll have things like a little egg drop challenge for a few people, giant Connect Four, giant Jenga. It's more of a few people participate, everybody else kind of watches. Not much going on. Effie guessed the carrot weight competition, again, trying to sell you stuff. Bubbles and Beauty Essence event, that's done trying to sell you. Like, it's like literally at times, my wife put it pretty bluntly. She said it felt like we were on a timeshare presentation, right? At times, at days at sea, it just seemed like you're constantly being hit with an attempt to empty your wallet, right? They're just trying to sell you something every single opportunity they had. And that's getting a little bit ridiculous. Now, I don't know if this is a result of the pandemic. Maybe, cruise ships have lost a fair amount of money, and especially the vendors who buy space on cruise ships were making nothing during that time. So this just could be an attempt to kind of satisfy them and give them an opportunity to get back in the black, right? So that could be a part of it. And maybe that's the situation on every cruise line. We just don't know yet because this is the first cruise we've taken since the pandemic. Then you get into the evening, and of course, I mean, generally between around 5:30 to 7 is when we're going to have dinner. So a lot of what happens earlier, although at this time there's really not much going on. And then at 7:30, you generally have a good event, but you also have the first of their theater shows. Now, this is something that kind of bothered me about their scheduling. I don't know who decides the schedule. I would assume it's the cruise director, which case this was Oz, but that may not be the case. But they generally always had something interesting happening at 7:30, but that's also the first show of their main event in the theater at 7:30. And we always prefer to go to the early shows. We don't really want to go to the late shows. So as a result of that, if we wanted to watch the main show, we had to give up on something, which was generally the case. It was what we did practically every single day. So we would miss out on something interesting to see the main show. And why they couldn't have scheduled that other interesting event earlier in the day boggles me. I don't understand. They have these huge gaps of nothing going on during the day except sales, but then they schedule something right alongside that main event. And my wife and I had talked about this, and she actually felt like it could be done on purpose in that their theater isn't huge. Okay, they're sizable like they are in every single ship, but there's no way you can fit the majority of the ship in that theater space. And they know quite a lot of people prefer to go to the early show. So by scheduling something else that's interesting at the same time, you may relieve the theater of the amount of pressure you would normally have of passengers interested in seeing the main event first, right? You pull some away and put them somewhere else so that the theater itself doesn't get too crowded. And there was a few shows specifically that actually had standing room only. So I could see that being maybe the reason why they scheduled that way, but it was still disappointing to us because there was long periods in the day where we were really doing nothing. To be honest, this was the first cruise I spent a lot of time in the cabin. A lot of time. Okay, we watched every episode of Frasier they had available. There was like 3 different shows that we watched that we literally saw every episode they had available on there, you know, like you choose your own show, right? They just have series on demand on their system that you can watch. And because there was such large swathes of time with nothing really going on that's interesting, we end up sitting in the cabin, taking it easy and just watching television. And that's something I can do at home. And I've never done that on any other cruise line before. So what's my overall opinion of this cruise? The good, the bad, the outstanding, the ugly of what I experienced on the Sapphire Princess, the Cape Horn and Strait Magellan cruise around the southern tip of South America. Before I get into that, it's important that you know that I'm not being paid for this review, okay? This is not what my channel is all about. You're going to see the majority of YouTube channels that review cruises are because that's all they do. And the reason they do it is because the cruise lines, in turn, provide them with upgrades, perks, promotional pricing in order to get that favorable review from them. Well, you're not going to get that from me. This is pure honesty, right? I'm like any other passenger that paid their way on and was looking to experience something fantastic. And for the most part, I got what I paid for, except when it came to what happened on board, okay? So let's start with the outstanding. And the outstanding, it's 2 things. One, the itinerary, outstanding, right? The places I got to visit were fantastic, right? They're up there in some of the most impressive places I've ever visited on this planet. I've visited quite a few, okay? I'm very well traveled. The service in the dining rooms, specifically the Vivaldi, and I got to shout out to head waiter Wood, junior waiter Indra, the dining room manager at the Vivaldi, Nathan, and the assistant manager, Satish. They're all A++, right? 10s across the board in my book. I also love being greeted by Susan every single time we went to dinner, and she always made that extra effort to try and have our specific table ready for us. And this is non-assigned seating, okay? It's not assigned. It's whatever's available is available, and they do their best to try and keep a specific table available for us so we could have the same waiters every single day. Fantastic, right? Above and beyond. A++. You guys, I wish I could just move you to every single cruise ship I'm on. That's how great they were. Some of the locations we visited exceeded my expectations. So like I said, the itinerary, bang on. But the activities on ship, brutal, absolutely brutal. I understand that for most people, a cruise is about relaxation and adventure, but I can relax as much as I want at home. Okay, that's kind of what it comes down to. And most people can. And the last thing I want to do on a cruise ship are the kind of things I do at home. And that's watching television, watching movies, reading, playing cards. I mean, I can do this at home, and I saw a lot of people doing exactly that, including myself, on ship. You don't want that experience. You want to come away from that ship with stories to tell and experiences you would normally never have while you're at home. So they failed there, and they failed in a big way. During the embarkation process, they damaged my mother's luggage. Blatantly damaged it. It was obvious, okay? We gave them the damage, and we gave them the luggage in great condition. By the time it got to the cabin, her extendable handle on her primary piece of luggage had been cranked over, bent over, and kinked in the handle itself. So we reported it to Princess Cruises, and they said to give them the luggage, they would take care of it, and remunerate us in some way or whatever. Don't even worry about it. We said, fine. Before they decided to do what they end up doing, they sent a waiver to the cabin asking that we sign away any rights to argument for what they decided. Strange, okay? Just very weird situation. We're like, whatever, and they're probably going to do the right thing anyway, so we go ahead and sign it. And in the end, all they did was bend the handle back in place so that you could still slide it up and down within the interior slots of the luggage, although where it was compromised was never fixed. Literally, when we disembarked, by the time we got from the ship to our hotel room in Santiago, Chile, it had already bent back. They didn't fix anything. They did zero for us. Didn't even offer us an onboard credit or any way or form. Basically, Mom was going to have to buy new luggage. We don't really care that much, but the fact that it was handled so poorly is very disappointing. So that's an ugly. Okay, that falls in the ugly category. Another issue we had on board, and this one was it's another strange situation here, but generally we attend a number of the art auctions, and I actually bought a piece of art on board. We actually won a piece of art on board in one of the auctions that I gifted to my mom for her birthday, which happened shortly after this cruise. So it was an opportunity for us to get something while we were there. And that's a bonus. Only in this case, early on in the cruise, I had been randomly selected through a raffle to win I basically won a discount coupon toward any auction purchase during that particular cruise, and it only applied to CP auctions, which is collector portfolio auctions. There's a higher tier of art available to you on these art auctions. If you've participated in some of the art auctions on cruise ships, you'll know what I'm talking about. And fortunately for me, the piece of art I won in one of the final auctions was a CP auction, only they refused to apply the credit because it had already been discounted. So I don't know how that one really happened. I got in a bit of an argument with it. We bitched back and forth, and they did give me a bit of a break, but not the full benefit I was supposed to receive. So that's very questionable behavior as well. So again, that kind of falls in the ugly category. Now, one of the great things about this particular cruise, one of the things that stood out to me, is the layout of the ship outside of the difficulty in getting to the international dining room was actually quite easy to get around. Very easy to get around. And the attentiveness of the staff was bang on. And the cleanliness of the ship was impeccable. I would watch them clean the trim each morning as we were making our way toward the international dining room for breakfast. And I mean, little pieces of trim that edged the doorways were being meticulously polished during the cruise itself. So the ship itself is gorgeous. And of course, I'll include a number of pictures of different areas of the ship. But the ship was great. The crew was fantastic. People were generally very likable. Like I said, the dining room was amazing. If it wasn't for just a few bad situations and a poor activities list, it would have been a much better experience for me. And I think that activities list wouldn't even been that bad if this was a Caribbean cruise, because there was always things available to you, say, top deck, but it was just too cold for a lot of the cruise, right? So you couldn't take advantage of that. The first few days we saw people in the pool, but then the midsection of the cruise, there was, maybe one or two people who were like hardcore, polar bear divers that were in the pool. Otherwise, everybody else was just clear of that area because it was just too cold. So they should have taken a cue from maybe what Norwegian did, because we sailed Norwegian in Alaska, so it was cold for the majority of our trip. And as a result of that, they always had things going on indoors. And they didn't take advantage of that opportunity on this particular cruise. And that's the one thing that soured it for me. I'm still glad I took the cruise. I'm very pleased I saw the places I did. And we did have a few exceptional experiences, especially with the food. But overall, I'm probably going to pick somebody over Princess the next time I go. Let me know what you think of your last Princess cruise in the comments.